You're watching IntoWineTV, and today we're talking about up-and-coming wine regions around the world. And Richard, tell us, what are some of the up-and-coming regions?
Well, that's a very big topic. Wine is being made literally everywhere in the world these days, places that you would hardly think. I haven't heard about any wine being made in Antarctica, but that may be one of the few places that's they haven't figured it out yet.
Ice wine.
Ice wine, exactly, yeah. Every state in the country now has wine production of some level or other. Some of the up-and-coming regions for me are areas actually that have long winemaking traditions, but many of us have had very little chance to try them before because they weren't imported out of what used to be parts of the Soviet Union. Croatian wine, Slovenian wine has long winemaking tradition. We're just starting to get it here in America. Very interesting stuff. There are parts of France. I still am a Francophile at heart, and I still believe the French make the best wine. But there are regions in France where they're making more wine. They're planting. They're trying different styles. Certainly in the Languedoc, which does have a long tradition, but not necessarily a fine wine. One can get really good values. One can get really interesting wines. The Jura, the Loire are great sources for wines that are very good values, that people didn't used to go to, but now that Bordeaux has gotten ridiculously pricey, and Burgundy and some of the more traditionally sought after wines, people who are more in the know about wine are going to some of the lesser known regions that have been making quality wine and have long traditions. You can turn to other parts of the world. India is now making a great deal of wine. It's become very popular among the middle and upper class in India. China is making wine. I have yet to have one that I really think is very good, but they may get the hang of it sooner or later. I had recently, in this country, I had a number of Virginia wines. It took Virginia hundreds of years to basically accomplish making good wine out of Vitis vinifera grapes, which is what all the fine wines we know come from. But they brought over an Italian winemaker 20, 30 years ago, I guess, and finally mastered it.
Yeah, Luca Pascina from Barbersville Winery is making a wine called Octagon, which I think is iconic, and it's certainly the best wine in Virginia, but it's, I think, amongst the best wines in America, and amongst the best wines in the world, in fact, and they age extremely well. But a lot of wines you mentioned, like Jura and Loire, I wouldn't describe as up-and-coming wine regions. I would say that places like the Douro in Portugal would be an up-and-coming region. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for the wine regions to make it in this country. For instance, Jason Tesoro, who writes for Sommelier Journal, which you write for, is just doing a piece on Moldovan wine. And he asked me to be the importer for Moldovan wines. And yes, once it gets exposure in Sommelier Journal, some of the sommeliers are going to be interested in it. But basically, it's an impossible sell. That sort of wine is, even Bulgarian wine, which is a massive wine industry, it wouldn't sell in America. People here don't even know where Bulgaria is. They might not even know where Canada is, but some of them. But it's really, really tough to get wines to take off in this market.
Well, the other tough thing is getting wines certainly imported. I'm a big fan of the wines in Switzerland. There's some really indigenous, intriguing things that you can't find them in the States. Yeah. And my thing is, certainly within my travel books, is when you travel, always have the local wines wherever you go. If you're in Canada in the Okanagan Valley, don't get a California wine. If you're in, I think Texas is making some really great strides. And I agree with Virginia. There's some really lovely things coming out of there. But I oftentimes see people going to a region. I'm a big fan of the Sierra foothills, and they will, here in California, and they will go with what they know. Well, I'll take something from Sonoma because I know that, as opposed to always sample the local food, always sample the local wines.
Yeah, and the problem here in America is that there's a wonderful, huge base of consumers. It's the biggest wine market in the world, or just about, who would love to try all these different wines. And there are importers like myself who would love to import these fabulous wines from all over the world, whether it's from Moldova or from Uruguay, or But our problem is that to get from us to the retailer who also wants to sell to their customers everything, we have to go through this hourglass where we have to go through a wholesaler. And the consolidation of wholesalers today means that there are very few wholesalers left, and none of them want new wine. We went to our New York distributor about another wine just last week, and they said, "You've got to be kidding," because we've just introduced so many wines to them. And we're lucky with that one, they're taking everything but if we go to other states where if you're with a distributor who markets the wines of Constellation or big Australian brands or Yellowtail, they have such pressure to sell those wines that we're just a gnat on the wall that they want you to go away, don't bring us any more wine. So to bring them something like a wine from Moldova, which there is no market for, to get them to take it on is like pulling teeth.
Back to Michael's point about trying the local wine in the local area. Not only is it, I mean, should you be supporting it and you're leaving less of a carbon footprint or whatever by trying the wine that didn't have to be shipped a long way, but it's most likely to be the wine that's going to go well with the food from that region as well, and that's really important. Because I think cuisine and wine and the beverages that go with that cuisine really develop and grow up together and tend to complement each other.
And I also think a great region is the Finger Lakes, which is not really up and coming in the sense of it's been around for a while, but it's now starting to get recognition. The same thing with Michigan wines. They're starting to get some of the recognition. I go back to Texas. Texas has had grape growing for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they didn't know what they were doing for about 390 of those. And they've only recently understood what grows best, and they're starting to really identify some of their regions. Route 290, which is near Fredericksburg, you've got a bunch of wineries right there, even though the fruit's grown in different areas of Texas. Up and coming is kind of, I think, a vague term because there's the places, as you have said, that have been around for hundreds of years. But
Virginia is definitely, Finger Lake's been there a long time, but I think if you put the pecking order, it's California, Washington, Oregon, then I think Virginia, then New York. I think
although Virginia is way back in terms of number of bottles, they're more like 7th or 9th in terms of
but in terms of quality of wine.
In terms of quality, I would tend to agree.
What regions offer the best value for the money?
Back to the ones I was mentioning that I agree are not necessarily new regions, but where you can get really good values. The Loire, Jura, Languedoc, for both reds and whites. You can get fabulous wines by really top makers for 15 to 20 bucks.
Portugal
in many
as well.
cases.
Yeah,
Portugal, and I love the dry reds that are coming out of
especially.
the Douro these days, and the wonderful Vino Verdes and other whites. For whites, you can get lots of values all over the place. Spain and Portugal are great sources for Albareños and the like that don't cost very much money. They're really good values. South America, my favorite thing coming out of Argentina really is the Torrontés grape. That's an aromatic, wonderfully food-friendly wine that you can get for $10 or less at a lot of stores.
Where do you find something like that?
Probably not your supermarket. I really am strongly against anybody going to the basic supermarket because generally you can't get help there, except for a few of us who live in wine-loving areas of California. But a retail, specialty retail wine shop is typically the best to go. And if you want to do more research, then finding out sources online for a particular region and then who's offering it.
And I was going to say for California, and this is just my opinion, but for California, I'm a huge fan of the Sierra foothills, which is Placerville, Sutter Creek, Jackson, Murphy's. For value, there are some high-end wines that are starting to get produced there in the foothills. But I think overall bang for the buck, it's certainly if you can compare that to Napa or Sonoma, which may not be fair, but let's be honest, you get wonderful wines for $15, $20 up in the Sierra foothills.
Back to the old world for a minute, Greece is another source of some of my favorite whites. They're incredibly food friendly. German Riesling is still way underpriced. It used to be hugely popular in this country, 100 years or so ago. Very much lost market share, and you can still get really terrific food friendly wines from Germany that are beautifully made, that have a long tradition for 15, 20, 25 bucks.
And the great thing about the German Rieslings, and what I think a lot of people fail to realize, is you have sweet versions and not sweet versions. I think a lot of people just think Riesling and go, oh, sweet. But there are some beautiful dry versions that I had when I was there, which are terrific and great values, I agree.
I think Hungary ferment from the Tokai region, the dry wine ferment is fantastically up and coming.
Yeah, and how can a consumer find out what these up-and-coming regions are? I mean, it's kind of overwhelming. There's so many all over the world.
I've got a blog, online, but there are a lot of great sources. And classes, too. If one is really starting to get interested in wine, in most major cities, there are wine classes that people can take
And
to learn more.
Again, my frustration is
Sommeliers.
Yeah, absolutely. But oftentimes the wines that we're talking about, I mean, if there's a mid-tier level, they're not imported to the U.S. So you know, go travel more and go find them there and bring them back in your suitcase.
Yeah, and do tell us when you find some of these interesting wines as you travel around. We'd love to hear from you about this and any of our other topics. Thank you for joining us at IntoWineTV, and we hope to see you soon.